A confession recorded from the testimony of Subetayin Boragul, scout of the Kheshig, in the 9th winter after the great Khan crossed the Onan into the north. 9 of us rode north from the Yenisei camp. 2 came back. One of those 2 never spoke again for the rest of his life. The other is me. And I'm telling this now only because the Khan who sent us is a long time in the ground. And the thing that took my brothers is still up there. And someone should say what it did before I die. We were Kheshig, night guard, scouts of the inner circle, not boys, not conscripts pulled off some step to fill a line. Every man in my 9 had killed before he was 15, had ridden 3,000 li without a hot meal, had slept in his saddle through weather that killed lesser men in an hour. Bat Erdeen, who led us, had scouted the Jin frontier and the Tangut passes and the black woods above Baikal. He did not imagine things in the dark. None of us did. I say this because everything I'm about to tell you depends on you believing we were competent. If you think we were superstitious herdsmen who saw a bear and ran, close your ears. If you understand that Kheshig scouts did not run from bears, or wolves, or Yurchin horsemen, or the winter itself, then stay. I will tell you what came out of the trees on the 15th night, what it did to 7 men who knew their trade, and what it was still doing when the 2 of us broke through the tree line 39 days later with our horses dying under us, and the last man's tongue frozen to his teeth. The Khan wanted a map. That is how it always began. He wanted a route through the northern forest belt, past the last of the reindeer people, to the great cold river the traders called the Lower Tunguska. He wanted to know if an army could move that way in winter. He wanted to know what lived up there. Jebe passed the order down to a captain named Kulan. Kulan chose Bat Erdena. Bat Erdeni chose 8 men. The last of the 8 was me. I was 22. I thought I understood the world. That is the last true thing I can say about the boy who rode north. We left on the 3rd day of the wolf moon. Winter horses, the small shaggy ones that eat snow and do not die. Dried meat, curd, marmot fat, grain for 40 days if we were careful. Bows, spears, sabers. Bat Erdeen wore lameller under his furs because he did not trust the northern people not to shoot from cover. We carried dry pine under wax, because a man who cannot make fire in the taiga is already dead and does not know it. The first 10 days were nothing. That is the important part. Cold, wind, elk and wolverine tracks. Once a snow leopard down out of the Siberia. We passed 2 camps of the reindeer people. They gave us fish and hot broth. At the 2nd camp, an old man asked where we were going. Bat Erdeen said north. The old man looked at him a long time, said one word I did not know, and then said in Mongol, "Do not go past the Black River." Bat Erdeen asked, "Which Black River?" "There are many." The old man said, "You will know it because the ice on it does not sing." I remember laughing inside. I thought it was the sort of thing old men say to make themselves feel important. I was wrong, as I was wrong about most things I believed before that winter. I want to say one more thing about the old man, because I have thought about him often since. When we mounted to leave, he did not walk out of his tent. He stood in the flap and watched us ride, and he did not raise a hand, and he did not call any blessing after us. His people bless every guest who leaves them, always. He did not bless us because he had already decided we were dead men, and the reindeer people do not waste blessings on dead men. On the 11th day, we crossed a river whose ice did not sing. I have to explain what that means. Ice on a living river breathes. It cracks. It groans. It settles under your weight and complains about the cold. Every scout in the north knows the sound. It is a companion. It tells you the river is alive underneath you. And the world is behaving the way the world should. The river on the 11th 11th day was silent. Not quiet, silent. Silent. 9 horses on the ice, and not one crack, not one groan, not one breath from below. Bat Erdine's mare, who had crossed the Kerlen in worse cold, stopped in the middle and would not move until he cut her flank with his heel and shouted at her. Even then she went sideways, crab-stepping, eyes rolling white. The other horses caught it the way sickness passes through a herd. My own tried to turn back twice. The pack horses moaned. Togrul's mare urinated on the ice, which a horse does not do unless it is afraid past the point of thinking. On the far bank, Togrul turned in his saddle, looked at the ice, and said quietly, "That was wrong." I said, "The old man." He said, "The old man." We did not turn back. Understand why? A Kheshig scout does not turn back because a river is quiet. A Kheshig scout does not turn back because an old herder said a strange thing 3 days ago. A Kheshig scout turns back when he is dead or when the Khan tells him to. So we rode on, and the second forest closed over us. The second forest was different. The first, between the last reindeer camp and the river, was lived in. Game trails, old woodcutter stumps, bird sound at dawn, small movement at dusk. The forest on the far side of the ice had none of it. The trunks were black. The gaps between the pines were wider, and yet the light did not travel far, because the branches met overhead in a lattice that turned the sky into gray webwork. No birds, no small tracks, no game trails at all, which was the worst of it, because a forest without game trails is a forest that game has been taught not to walk in. By the 13th day, I'd stopped noticing the absence, the way a man in a quiet room stops noticing the quiet. That was the day we found the tracks. We came into a clearing where a small elk had been killed. That was not unusual. Wolves kill elk in the taiga every day of the winter. What was unusual was how. The elk had not been run down. It had not been hamstrung. It had not been opened at the belly. It had been broken. Its neck was crushed and its spine had been pulled out through its back, cleanly, as a man pulls a rope out of a coil. The meat was untouched. Only the spine was gone. The rest of the animal lay frozen in the snow, with its eyes open and its tongue still pink where it hung out of its mouth. Bat Erdine got off his horse. He walked around the elk 3 times. Then he crouched at the snow. No wolf tracks, no bear tracks, no human tracks. Only 2 sets of prints in the snow around the elk, and both were the same, and both were as long as a grown man's forearm, from fingertip to elbow. I have seen bear tracks. A big brown bear of the taiga leaves a print a small child can lie down inside. These were larger, 5 toes, claws that went 4 fingers deep into the frozen snow. And the frozen snow of the wolf moon is harder than most stone you will try to break with your hands. Bat Erdine laid his hand flat inside a single toe of one print. His whole hand fit from heel of palm to fingertip, and there was still room at the end for the claw. He stared at that a long time. When he stood up, his face was the color a man's face becomes when he understands that his experience of the world has just been made smaller. Batu, the youngest, laughed and said it was a demon. He was joking. Nobody laughed with him. Bat Erdine looked at the tree line on the north side of the clearing. He looked for a long time. Then he said, "We are being watched right now." I looked. I saw nothing. Pine trees, shadow, the blue-black of the winter afternoon. He said, "Do not stare. Get on your horse. We are leaving this clearing at a walk, not a run, and no man looks back until I say." We did what he said. My back was to the tree line, and I felt it there like a hand I could not see. I did not look back, because Bat Erdeen had said not to, and I understood then why the veteran said Bat Erdeen had never lost a man on a scout. He could feel things the rest of us could not yet. That night, we camped in a hollow between 3 great pines. No fire, 2 watches instead of 1. Nobody slept well. In the morning, Togrul's horse had a long, thin cut down the left side of its neck, from behind the ear to the top of the shoulder, clean as a knife. And the horse had been tied inside our circle all night, 6 paces from where 2 men had been awake and watching. And no one had heard anything. And there were no tracks in the snow around the horse except our own. Bat Erdeen looked at the cut a long time. Then he said, "It wanted us to know." I said, "Know what?" He said, "That it can reach in. Sit with that morning. 6 men, 6 sets of eyes, 9 horses, 1 fire pit at the center." And something walked in, took its time, drew 1 clean line down the neck of a horse that did not make a sound, and walked out again, and left no track in the snow. There is only one way a thing does that. From above. Bat Erdeen did not say it that morning. He said it 4 days later, and by then I did not need him to say it. He said only, it wanted us to know that it can reach in, and we packed the camp, and we rode on. We should have turned back. Every man among us knew it. Bat Erdeen knew it best. But we were Kheshig, and the Khan had asked for a map. And a Kheshig scout who comes home without the map he was sent for does not come home at all, not in the ways that matter. So we rode on. That is my share of the guilt. I did not argue for turning back. None of us did. On the 14th day, we found the first camp. Not our camp. Not a reindeer herder camp. A Mongol camp. I do not mean it looked like one. I mean it was one. 3 horses, dead, still tied to a picket line, frozen upright on their feet, heads down, as if they had died standing, and the cold had held them there. A tent, half collapsed, made of the same reindeer skin as ours. A cooking pot upside down in the snow. 4 saddles laid out in a neat row beside the tent, the way a scout lays his saddle when he expects to ride the next morning. No men, no bodies, no blood, no sign of struggle, no tracks leaving the camp except the ones we had just made coming in. Batu said, "Whose camp is this?" Bat Erdeen said, "Ours." He meant one of the Khans. He meant someone had been sent before us, and no one had told us, and no one had come back to say what happened. And someone in the chain of orders had known and sent us anyway. We went through it carefully. Togrul checked the pot. Food still frozen in the bottom, overturned mid-meal. He checked the saddles. Each had a bow tied to it in the Kheshig way with the string still on, which meant these men had not been drawn up to fight. He checked the tent. 4 bedrolls, all laid out, all empty. In one, a small carved bone amulet. Togrul picked it up, turned it over in his glove, and sat down in the snow very slowly. He held it up and said, "This was my cousin's." His cousin was named Ochir. Ochir had ridden north 2 summers before with a scout troop of 6. None had come back. The report said Buryat raiders on the return leg, well south of the ice-silent river. Togrul said, "There were no raiders." Bat Erdeen said, "No." Togrul said, "They told my aunt Ochir was killed by Buryats." Bat Erdeen said, "I know what they told her." Togrul put the amulet in his belt pouch and did not speak again that day. We buried nothing because there was nothing to bury. We took almost nothing because everything worth taking had been left neatly in place. And it felt wrong, the way stealing from a corpse feels wrong. Bat Erdeen stood over the 4 saddles and counted them out loud. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then he said, "There were 4 of them, and now there are none. and their horses are still tied, and there are no tracks. Togrul said, "The ice." Batterdine said, "The ice." He meant the river. He meant the river had told us, and we had crossed it anyway. The howl came on the 15th night, an hour before dawn. Understand what silence is in the deep taiga in winter. No wind under the trees. The wind is up above, in the tops of the pines, moving like a slow river you can hear but not feel. On the ground where you lie under your furs, it is still. No insects, no birds, no small animals. Even the horses do not shift, because it is too cold to waste heat on motion. In that silence, a sound that would be small anywhere else is enormous. The howl was not a wolf. I have heard wolves my whole life. Steppe wolves, Kenti wolves, the small red wolves that follow the reindeer herds. A wolf howl has a shape. It rises, it holds, it falls, it ends. It is a song, and even when it is frightening, you recognize it. This was not a song. This was a long, low note that started somewhere north of us and did not rise and did not fall and did not end for what I counted. Lying in my furs with my hand on my knife, as 40 of my own heartbeats, 40, I counted them. When it stopped, it did not fade the way a howl fades. It cut off, cleanly, the way a man cuts off a word when someone tells him to be quiet. Nobody in the tent spoke. Every man was awake. Every man had counted the same 40 beats. Then from the south of us, closer than the first, a second note answered. The same shape, the same length, the same clean cut at the end. I thought there were two. I thought there were two, and one was north and one was south, and we were between. I was wrong. It took me almost a week to understand why. There were not two. There was one. It had moved. Between the first howl and the second, perhaps the space of 10 breaths. The thing that had howled from the north had crossed to the south of us. That distance, along the ridge we had ridden, was more than 10 spear throws. Nothing walks it in 10 breaths. Nothing runs it either. Whatever made those two howls had crossed the ground behind us in a way I still do not understand. In the dark, in deep snow, without breaking a branch or making a footfall we could hear. That night, I still thought there were two. And it was almost a mercy. Because if I had known there was only one, and that the one could encircle us in a breath, I do not think I could have gotten back on my horse. Batterdine said one word in the dark. He said, "Up." We rode before the sun. Fast, but not in a panic. Because a panicked horse in deep snow is a dead horse. Batterdine turned us east, not north. When Togrul asked why, he said, "Because they are north and south of us, and we go where they are not." He was wrong. It was not his fault. There was no right answer. There had not been one since the river. For 3 days after the howling, we saw nothing and heard nothing, and that was worse. When something announces itself, you know where it is. When it stops, you know it has decided it does not need to. Bat-Erden told us to ride tighter, pack horses in the middle, sleep in shifts of 3, not 2, and watch not the ground, but the tops of the trees. Because, he said, whatever this thing was, it was tall. Batu asked how he knew. Bat-Erden said, because of the elk's spine, and because of Togrul's horse. He did not explain. I understood later. To pull a spine out of an elk the way that spine had been pulled, you had to lift the elk with one hand and hold it there while you took the spine with the other. Nothing on 4 legs does that. Nothing standing at the height of a man does either. And a horse's neck cut cleanly in the middle of a guarded camp with no track in the snow is a wound from a hand that came down from above and went back up and did not touch the ground. We rode east. The land began to change under us. The pines grew even bigger. The gaps widened. On the second day east, we came out onto a long, flat plain of snow with a frozen bog at the far end. And we could see for the first time in a week. And the sight of open sky was so relieving that Batu laughed. And Bad Erdine did not tell him to stop. We crossed the plain in daylight and rode along the edge of the bog. And I remember thinking, foolishly, that whatever had been following us was a creature of the deep forest and would not come into the open. That night, on the far side of the bog, we camped in a hollow with a windbreak of low willow. Bad Erdine said we would build a fire because the horses needed the warmth. 3 men on watch, Batu and Naranbatar and me. I was looking at the coals when Batu said, in a voice so flat it did not sound like his voice, "There is something on the bog." I looked up. The bog was to the north, a long white sheet bordered by low willows, and the moon was up, and out in the middle of it, perhaps 200 paces from us, something was walking, upright. That was the first thing I understood. Tall, that was the second. Walking slowly, walking a line parallel to our camp, north to south along the far edge of the bog. Not looking at us, or rather, not turning its head toward us. But I understood, watching, that it did not need to turn its head to see us. It was showing us its silhouette. It was walking that line for our benefit. It was letting us take its measure. Naranbatar drew his bow. Bad Erdine, who I did not know was awake, said from his bedroll without opening his eyes, "Put it down." Naranbatar put the bow down. The shape walked to the south end of the willows and stopped. Stood there a long time, too far to see clearly, but I could see the outline of it. And I could see, in the top of the outline, points, antler points, broken, bent forward, not up. That is what I saw first, before I understood I was seeing it. And my mind tried to tell me it was an elk standing on its hind legs, which is a thing that does not happen and cannot happen. And my mind knew it could not happen and offered me the impossible thing anyway, rather than what was actually there. It turned. It walked back the way it had come, all the way to the north end of the willows, stopped, turned again, walked back to the south, stopped, 3 times, 3 passes, the length of the bog, at a slow, steady pace, never once looking at us, never once quickening. When the 3rd pass ended, it walked into the willows on the south end, and it was gone, and the bog was empty, and Batu was crying without making a sound, and I only knew it because I could see his shoulders shaking under his fur. Bad Erdine said, from his bedroll, still without opening his eyes, it was measuring us. I said, measuring us for what? He said, for the time it will take to eat us. Sleep now. It will not come tonight. Nobody slept. But he was right. It did not come that night. On the 18th day, we found the 2nd camp, not one of ours. Old, very old. The tent was not reindeer skin. It was some hide I did not recognize, tanned in a way I had never seen. And the poles were not wood. They were bone, long curved bones from an animal much larger than any elk. The camp had been abandoned a long time. Snow had drifted through the flap and packed itself into the shape of the room inside. But at the center, driven into the frozen earth so deep that even the wolf moon cold had not lifted it, was a spear. 2 men tall, shaft of black wood, older than anything I had ever touched. Iron head, worked in a shape none of us knew. Leaf-shaped, with a groove down the middle, pointing north. Markings were carved into the shaft. Bad Erdine brushed the snow off with his glove. Not Mongol, not Tungut, not Chinese, not any script he knew. And Bad Erdine had seen many. Small, angular cuts in a spiral from the head down toward the ground. The last mark, near the base, he did know. It was a mark the reindeer people cut into the trees around a place where a person has died badly, so that other travelers will know not to camp there. He walked around the spear 3 times, the way he had walked around the elk. Then he said, "Someone put this here as a warning." I said, "Warning who?" He said, "Anyone coming from the south." I said, "Warning them about what?" He looked at me and did not answer. I looked at the direction it pointed. North, the direction we had been going before we turned east. Then I looked back the way we had come, and I understood, without wanting to, that we had ridden past this spear on our way in. Not this one, others. There must have been others in the country between the river and here, and we had ridden past them without noticing, because we had not been looking for warnings in a shape we could not read. We rode 2 hours east and made a cold camp in the lee of a fallen tree. That was the night the horses started to break. You have to understand horses. A Mongol pony in deep winter is the toughest animal that has ever lived. It will eat bark. It will eat lichen scraped off a rock. It will stand in a wind that kills the man on its back. It does not spook easily and does not run without reason. When a Mongol pony refuses to eat, it is the world that is wrong, not the horse. None of the horses ate. We put grain in front of them, and they turned their heads away. Togrul's mare, the one whose neck had been cut, was shaking, not shivering, shaking. Her legs would not hold still. She stared into the dark north of the camp, ears flat back. And every so often she would step backward, and Togrul would take her rein and steady her, and she would step backward again. Bat Erdene said, "It is here." Nobody asked what he meant. We built a fire. We had not built one since the bog. Bat Erdene said the fire would not save us, but a man freezing to death cannot fight. And a man who cannot fight is already dead. And if we were going to die tonight, we would die warm and with our hands on our weapons. He posted every man on watch. Nobody slept. I want to tell you what I saw that night, because it is the first time I saw it clearly. And I want to describe it the way it happened, not the way stories describe things. 2 hours before dawn, the fire low. I was on the north side of the camp, sitting on my heels with my bow across my knees, watching the tree line. The moon was near full, and the light on the snow was so bright I could see the shape of every pine trunk in the forest ahead of me. Between 2 of those trunks, something was standing. I do not mean I saw it move into place. I mean, I looked at the gap, and there was nothing there. And I looked again a moment later, and there was something. It had not walked in. It had simply become present in the gap, the way a shadow becomes present when you turn your head. Tall. That was the first thing I understood. The gap between those pines was 3 times the height of a man on a horse, and the thing filled most of it. Its shoulders were level with the lower branches. Its head was above them, and its head had shape, and the shape had points. I thought at first I was looking at an elk, a huge one on its hind legs. That was what my mind wanted it to be. Then the shape moved its head slightly, and I saw that what I had taken for the top branches of the pines behind it were actually antlers coming out of its skull. And the antlers were broken, and the points that remained were bent forward, not up. An elk's antlers point up and back. An elk's antlers are a crown. This thing's antlers pointed forward over its face, like a cage, like the ribs of a hand cupped over something. Between the antler bars, I could see the shape of a skull, not a fur-covered head, a skull. long, narrow, forward set on a heavy neck. The fur around it did not cover the face. It framed it, and the face inside the frame was bone, and the bone was pale, and the bone was smiling, because the bone had no lips to do anything else. Then it opened its eyes. I will tell you exactly what the eyes looked like, because this is the thing I have not been able to stop seeing for 53 years. Not yellow, not red, not the eyes of any predator I have ever seen or heard of. Pale, pale blue-white, the color of the sky in the hour before a blizzard, and they did not reflect the moon. They made light. They were lit from inside, dimly, like two lamps behind oiled paper. And when they opened, they looked directly at me. Not at the camp, at me. I understood several things at once. It had been watching us for days. It had chosen us one by one, and it was choosing me now. The elk's spine, the horse's cut neck, the 4 saddles, the walking pattern along the bog, not accidents, not incidents. A signature, a way of writing, a way of saying, I have been here, and I will be here again. And most clearly of all, it was not going to attack the camp tonight. It wanted us to know it was there. That was tonight's message. I did not shout. I do not know why. I think part of me understood that shouting would break something, that if I made a sound, the thing between the trees would take that as permission, and I did not want to give it permission. I sat with the bow across my knees, and I looked at the eyes, and the eyes looked at me. And after what felt like a long time, but was probably 10 breaths, the eyes closed, and the shape was gone, and there was only the gap between the trees again, empty, with the moonlight coming through. I sat there until the sun came up. I did not tell anyone until we were riding, 2 hours later. I told Bat Erdini. He listened without interrupting. When I was done, he said, "Good. You did the right thing by staying still. If you had drawn the bow, it would have come." I said, "How do you know?" He said, "Because I saw it too. On the south side, 10 breaths after you." I said, "There are 2. He said, "There is 1. It went around." I said, "Around how?" He said, "I do not know." But it did. On the 20th day, we understood East was not going to save us. Togrul, riding at the rear, called out. Tracks crossing our line, moving south to north ahead of us. We stopped. Bat Erdine rode forward and looked. Fresh. The same tracks we had seen at the elk. 5 toes, claws 4 fingers deep. But the stride was longer now. Much longer. He measured with his spear. The spear was nearly as tall as he was. 1 stride was a spear and a half. He came back and said quietly, "It is running, not toward us, not away, across our path, ahead of us, cutting our line and moving north to north again." In an hour, the pattern was clear. It was drawing a shape around us. It was drawing a circle, and we were inside it. Togrul said, "How big is the circle?" Bat Erdine said, "I do not know yet." We tested it. That was his last real command. He said, "We ride due east at the fastest walk the horses can hold, and we mark every track we cross, and we see if the circle has a gate. 4 hours east, 7 crossings, 7, each set fresh, each at a different angle." The circle was not a circle. It was a weave. It was tightening around us the way a woman weaves the top of a basket, one strand over another. Bat Erdine stopped us at midday. "There is no gate. It is not letting us pick a direction. It has already picked one for us." I said, "Which one?" He said, "South, back the way we came." We turned south. North was where the thing was coming from. East and west were its 2 shoulders, and the tracks proved it. South was our only line. and south was where our own tracks lay in the snow. And our own tracks were the only guide any of us had left to anything human. The moment we turned south, the tracks stopped crossing our line. 2 hours and not a single fresh print, as if the weaver had put her basket down and stepped back to watch. Bat Erdeen did not say anything about it. He did not have to. The first man died on the 21st day. His name was Chulun, Bat Erdeen's cousin, 11 years at his side, second best archer among us and the best tracker. He did not die because he did anything foolish. He died because the thing decided that today it wanted one of us. And Chulun was riding at the outside of our column when it decided. We were moving through a stretch where the pines were very close and the snow was not as deep because the branches held most of it up. More shadow, less sky. Bat Erdeen had told us to ride tight, and we were riding tight. But the trail was narrow, and the column stretched thin, and Chulun was the last but two. I did not see it. I heard it, a sound that was not a scream, because Chulun did not have time to scream. A wet sound, like a heavy sack of grain hitting frozen ground. A horse making a noise I had never heard a horse make before or since. A whistle and a shout together. Then branches breaking, high up, above the trail. Then nothing. Bat Erdeen was already off his horse and running back with his saber out. When we reached where Chulun had been, there was no Chulun, his horse standing in the snow, shaking, his bow on the ground, unbroken. His fur cap 10 paces off the trail, with a single clean line torn through the top of it, as if a knife had opened it. And a splash of red on the snow that was not the shape of a body falling. It was the shape of a body being lifted. Bat Erdeen looked up. The lowest branches were 20 feet up. There was blood on them. There was blood on branches 30 feet up. There was blood on branches 40 feet up. Chulun was not on the ground. Chulun was not anywhere we could see. Chulun was gone up. Bat Erdeen put his saber back in its sheath very slowly. He said, "Do not look up anymore. Look at the trail. Get on your horses. We ride." Batu asked, "What about Chulun?" Bat Erdeen said, "Chulun is with the sky now. We ride, we rode. I have not slept a full night since." The second man died on the 22nd. Ganbold, killed in front of me. I will describe it once, and then I will not describe it again. Cold camp in a hollow. 7 of us. Bat Erdeen had told us to sleep in the saddle, on our horses, in a circle facing outward, with our reins tied wrist to wrist, so that if one horse broke, the others would know. It was the coldest way to sleep, and the only way that gave us any chance. Ganbold's horse was next to mine. His wrist was tied to mine by a leather thong. I was half asleep. I felt the thong pull. I opened my eyes. Ganbold was not in his saddle. The thong on my wrist was pulled tight, angling up, into the dark above me. I looked up. I could not stop myself. Bat Erdeen had told us not to look up, but I looked up. Ganbold was in the air, 10 paces above my head, still alive, making a sound, looking down at me. Then the thing above him, which I could not see clearly because it was too high and the moon was behind it, tilted its head. And it was the antlers I saw first, the broken cage of antlers coming forward over its face, and the pale eyes below. And the eyes were looking at me, not at Ganbold. And then the thing bit down, and I will not describe what I heard. And the thong on my wrist went slack, and Ganbold's saddle was empty below me, and I was still tied by the wrist to nothing. And Bat Erdeen was cutting the thong before I even understood he was next to me. We rode again. The alternative was to stay, and staying was worse. Now, I have to tell you something I did not understand until much later. riding south with time to think. It could have taken all of us in one night. It could have taken the whole camp on the 18th night when I first saw it between the trees. It did not. It took Chulun on the 21st and Ganbold on the 22nd. And after Ganbold, it did not take another man for 4 more days. It was pacing itself. It was rationing us. It was making the pursuit last. Bat Erding understood before I did. On the night after Ganbold, when the horses could not go any further, he sat with his back against a pine and his saber across his knees and said, in a voice so low I had to lean in, "It is not hunting us. It is herding us." I said, "Herding us where?" He said, "Back the way we came. Back to the river." I said, "Why?" He said, "Because we crossed." I did not understand. He explained. The spear driven into the frozen ground, pointing north, was not a warning to us. It was a boundary. Someone, a long time ago, had marked the line and had told the thing on the other side of it, or agreed with it, or bargained with it, that this was where the human world stopped. We had crossed. The old man had told us not to. The river had told us not to. The 4 saddles had told us not to. The elk had told us not to. We had crossed anyway. It was not trying to kill us. It was returning us to the line. And once it had returned us to the line, he said, it would want us to remember. And it would want the people we told to remember. So it would let some of us live. I said, "How many?" He said, 1, maybe 2. Enough to speak. Not enough to be believed easily. I said, "Why are you telling me this?" He said, "Because you are one of the 2. He knew. Somehow, he knew. But Erding was not a shaman. He had no special sight. He was a scout. He had spent his life watching how animals decide. He had watched this animal for 6 days and understood how it was choosing. It took the men at the edges of the column. It took the men whose horses were the weakest. It took the men who fell asleep last on watch. I was in the middle. My horse was the strongest. I slept badly and woke at every sound. He was telling me, without saying it, that I would be one of the ones it left alive to tell. I said, "And you?" He did not answer. 2 nights later, he walked out of the camp on his own, while I was on watch, deliberately, so that I would see him go. He left his horse tied to the picket. He left his lameller folded on his saddle. He took only his saber, his bow, and a small pouch of dried curd. He walked past me at the north edge of the camp and put one gloved hand on my shoulder and said without stopping, "Ride at dawn. Do not look for me. Do not wait." I said, "Why?" He said, "Because it has taken 2, and it will take 2 more tonight, if there is no offering, and I would rather choose than be chosen." Then he walked north into the trees. I heard nothing that night. No howl, no branches breaking, nothing. That silence was the loudest thing I have ever listened to. It went on until dawn. When the sky began to gray and I had to wake the others, I did not know how to say it. In the end, I said only, "He is not coming back. We ride." No one asked me anything more. They had seen him leave, and every man among us had already understood what he had gone to do. In the morning, there were 5 of us. I owe each of my brothers a line, at least a line. Batu, the youngest, went first on the 26th, watering his horse at a stream where the ice had thinned. He knelt on the bank to break it with the butt of his spear. A sound behind him like a heavy branch settling under snow. When I turned, he was gone. His horse ran back to us alone with a long red line on its flank in the same clean shape as Togrul's mare had shown us at the beginning. The horse would not stop shaking. We had to leave it. A shaking horse in the deep taiga slows the column, and by then A slow column was a dead column. Naran Batar, on the 28th, fell from his horse. He had not slept in 3 nights. He had been muttering to himself all day, phrases in a language none of us understood, which frightened me more than any howl. He slid out of his saddle in the middle of an afternoon ride, and while we were trying to lift him back on, the horses on the north side of the column began to scream, and Togril shouted to leave him and mount. And I looked at Naran Batar's face, and Naran Batar looked at me, and he shook his head once, and I understood he did not want to be lifted. And we left him, and I heard him make one small sound as we rode away, and then nothing. Sagan, on the 29th, lay down in the snow at the noon halt and would not get up. He was smiling. He asked us, in a very clear voice, to leave him. He said he was tired. He said the trees were pretty, and he wanted to look at them for a while. We could not carry him, and we could not stay, and I have wondered every day since what he was smiling at. And I've decided I do not want to know. That left 3. Togril, myself, and a man named Monkey, whose horse had gone lame and who was walking beside it with his hand on its neck. 4 days from the river, no food, horses eating the bark off the pines. The coldest week I have ever lived through, and I have lived through many. On the 31st day we saw it in the sun. I had believed, without admitting to myself I believed it, that it was a thing of the dark. Every appearance had been at night or before dawn. Every sound had been in the deep hours. I had built a small hope that if we could reach the river before the next darkness, we might be safe. The 31st was clear and cold, and the sun was low and white in the south. We were riding along a ridge above a frozen stream bed. Togril in front, me in the middle, Monkey behind, walking. We came around a bend, and there, on the far side of the stream bed, standing still in the full light of the sun, was the thing. It was worse in the sun. In the dark, it had been a shape and a set of eyes. In the sun, it was a body. Fur the color of wet iron, matted, hung with old snow and old blood frozen brown against its shoulders. Arms as long as its legs, hanging below its knees when it stood upright, which it was. Claws as long as my forearm, black, the color of a raven's wing, but longer than any raven has ever grown. The face under the broken antlers was not a wolf's, and not a bear's. The features were in the places features go, but the arrangement was wrong. The mouth was too wide, and the corners went too far back into the skull. Too many teeth, not the same size as each other. No nose, 2 slits high in the bone. And the eyes, in the daylight, were not lit the way they had been in the dark. They were only pale, pale like the inside of an oyster. And they were the eyes of something that understood exactly what it was looking at. It did not move. We did not move. Monkey, behind me, made a small sound in his throat. His lame horse pulled its head back sharply. Then the thing lifted one hand slowly and pointed south. I mean this literally. It extended one long clawed hand, and it pointed, with what would have been an index finger on a human hand, south, down the stream bed, in the direction of the river. Togril, in front of me, whispered, "Go." We went. Not gallop because Monkey could not gallop, but we went. And the thing on the far bank did not follow. It stood in the sun, hand still up, and watched us go. And I looked back once, only once, when we were nearly out of sight around the next bend. And it was still there, and its hand was still up. And I understood what Bat Irdine had told me 2 weeks before. It was returning us. It was showing us the way home. It was making sure we did not lose the path. The days after the stream bed run together in memory, the way ice runs together on a river as it thickens. I remember Monkey's horse dying. I remember burying Monkey under stones because the ground was too hard to dig. I remember Togrul's eyes freezing shut and cutting his eyelashes free with the point of my knife because he asked me to, and his hands were too numb to hold the knife himself. I remember he cried while I did it, though he made no sound, and the tears froze on his face before they reached his beard. Monkey died on the 33rd, not from the thing but from the cold, quietly, in his sleep, in a hollow where we had stopped because his horse would not go any further. Togrul and I buried him under stones and said the words a Mongol says over a fallen brother. And we rode on with 2 horses between the 2 of us, taking it in turns to walk. We crossed the ice-silent river on the 35th day. The ice was still silent. Our horses were nearly dead. Togrul was riding with his eyes closed because his eyelids had frozen shut again, and I did not have the strength in my hands to help him, and he was following the sound of my horse's hooves. When we came off the ice on the south bank, I stopped, and I turned in my saddle, and I looked back at the north bank. The thing was there, standing at the tree line on the far side of the river, very still. I could not see its eyes from that distance, but I could feel them the way I had felt them on the 18th night through the pines. It watched us until we were off the river. Then it turned and walked back into the trees, and it was gone, and the tree line on the north bank was just a tree line again. Togrul, whose eyes were still frozen shut, said, "Is it there?" I said no. He said, "Are you lying?" I said no. He never spoke again after that day. His eyes healed, his mouth did not. Something in him had closed when we crossed the river, and it did not open again. He lived another 11 years and tended horses for a small ordu in the west, and ate and slept and worked and did not speak, not once, not to anyone, not even to his own wife when he took one, until the day he died. I visited him twice in those years. The second time, at the end, he took my hand and squeezed it once, and looked at me, and I understood that he remembered, and he understood that I remembered, and that was all we needed to say. I rode into the Yenisei camp on the 39th day, alone, with Togrul slumped against my back in the saddle because he could no longer sit up on his own. The sentries did not recognize us. Bat Erdine's captain, Kulan, came out to meet us and looked at me, and looked at Togrul, and looked at the 2 horses which were all that remained of 9, and he did not ask what had happened. He knew. He had known before he sent us. The anger of that understanding has never left me. He said, "The map." I said, "There is no map." He said, "Why not?" I said, "Because there is no route." He looked at me a long time. Then he said, "What stopped you?" I told him, all of it. I sat in his tent with a bowl of hot broth in my hands that I could not lift to my mouth. And I told him every night, every track, every death, every man's name in order. He listened all the way through. He did not interrupt. When I was done, he did not tell me I was mad. He did not tell me I was a coward. He did not tell me I had failed. He said, "There was a scout sent north last spring. 4 men. They did not come back." I said, "I know." "We found their camp." He said, "There was a scout sent north the summer before that. 6 men. They did not come back either." I said, "And before that?" He said, "There was one every second summer for 6 generations, since the time of the Khan's great-grandfather. Every time we send. Every time they do not come back. And every time 1 man comes back." And he tells the story, and we file the story in the Khan's tent, and we send again. I said, "Why?" He said, Because the Khans do not believe stories. They believe maps. And we have never had a map. I said, "Why did you send us?" He said, "Because the Khan asked." That was all. I asked no more. There was no more to ask. The Khan, when he was told, ordered that the country north of the ice-silent river be marked on all the maps of the empire as unpassable, and that no scout should be sent there again, and that no army should attempt it, not in his lifetime, and not in the lifetimes of his sons. He did not give a reason. He did not need to. The order was obeyed. I have seen the maps. The country north of that river is a blank on every one of them. Not a mountain, not a forest, a blank. As if the mapmakers, one after another, understood without being told that some places should not be drawn even in ignorance, because drawing them, even wrongly, is a kind of invitation. I have wondered, in the 53 years since, what the thing was. I have heard many words for it in many languages, reindeer people who called it by a name they would not speak twice in one night, a Tungus shaman who told me it was older than the ice, that the ice had come south once and gone back north and left it behind, a Buddhist monk who told me it was a hungry ghost of enormous appetite that had forgotten it and it was a ghost, a Chinese scholar who told me it was not one thing but a kind of thing, and that there were more than one of them, spaced across the northern forest at long intervals, each one holding a territory, each one guarding a line. I do not know which of them was right. I think all of them were partly right, and none of them completely. I think it was what it was, and no word we have was made for it, and no word we make now will fit it either. But I have my own idea, and I will tell it now, because I'm old, and I have thought about this for 53 years, and it is the only thing I have that no other man has. I think the thing was not what came into the taiga. I think it was there first. I think the taiga grew up around it the way skin grows around a splinter. I think the trees learn to stand where they stand because it moves between them. I think the silence of the ice-silent river is not silence. I think the river is holding its breath. I think everything north of that river is holding its breath, and has been holding its breath for longer than any people have been in that country. And the thing that lives there is what the country breathes when it exhales, once every long while, in the shape of one of us being lifted into the branches. We were not scouts up there. We were not soldiers. We were not the Khan's men. We were dust in a lung. One last thing. 3 years ago, in the autumn, an old man came to my ger. A trader from the north, a man of the reindeer people. He had heard somehow, in the way news travels among those people, that there was a Kheshig veteran in the west who had crossed the ice-silent river and come back. He had ridden a long way to find me. He sat by my fire and drank my tea and did not speak for a long time. Then he said, "The one who followed you?" I said, "Yes." He said, "It followed you across." I said, "No. It stopped at the river. I saw it stop." He shook his head. "It stopped at the river the day you crossed. But it has been walking south ever since, slowly. 1 day's walk each year. It is not fast when it is not hunting. It is patient." I said, "Why?" He said, "Because you crossed, and it is not finished with you." I did not sleep that night. I have not slept many nights since. I am old now. I do not have long. I have made my peace with the sky and with the ground, and I have said the words I need to say, and I have set my affairs in order. But sometimes, in the hour before dawn, when the wind is up and the fire is low and my grandson is breathing in the corner of the ger, I hear something outside that is not the wind and not the horses and not any animal I know. A long, low note that starts and does not rise and does not fall for 40 of my heartbeats, and then cuts off, cleanly, the way a man cuts off a word when someone tells him to be quiet. I have counted the years since I crossed. 53. If the old trader was right, and I believe he was, then the thing has walked 53 days south of the river in that time. 53 days is not far, in the country up there. 53 days is nothing to a thing that has walked since the ice went home. But my grandson is 19. He is a scout. He rides for the grandson of the Khan who sent me, and last month he was told to ride north, to look at a country the mapmakers have left blank, to find a route through the great forest to the Lower Tunguska. He asked me if I had ever been in that country. I said no. I lied to him because I love him. I do not think the lie will save him. I think the thing that followed us has been walking a long time and has been patient the way old things are patient. And I think it does not forget faces. And I think if my grandson crosses the river his grandfather crossed, the thing will know him by the blood, and it will come out of the tree line at his back, and it will lift one long clawed hand, and it will point. And there will be no Bat Erdin this time to walk north in the dark and buy him the distance. I have told you this because someone should know. The maps say the country north of the river is blank. The maps are wrong. The country is not blank. It is occupied. It has been occupied longer than any khanate, and it will be occupied longer than any khanate to come. It was never our country. It was only ever the country of the thing with the broken antlers and the pale eyes. And we were the intrusion, and it let 2 of us live because it wanted a message carried. And I am the last mouth left that carries it. Do not cross the ice-silent river. If you hear a howl in the deep taiga that does not rise and does not fall, count your heartbeats until it stops, and then get on your horse and ride south and do not look up, no matter what you hear in the branches above you. And if, in the sun of an ordinary afternoon, on a ridge above a frozen stream bed, you see something standing on the far bank with antlers bent forward over its face like a cage, and it lifts one long hand and points south. Go. Do not thank it. Do not question it. Do not look back. It is not being merciful. It is only sending you home, to tell the rest of us that the line is still there, and the line is still watched, and the thing that watches it is still awake. And it has been awake a very long time, and it is not tired yet. Testimony ends. The scout Subeteyin Boragul died in the winter following this account. His grandson rode north the same season and did not return. No further scouts were sent until the next generation, when they were sent again, as they have always been sent, and as they will be sent, until the line is finally understood, or until there is no one left to send.